Good evening, Crosspoint kids, and welcome to Bedtime Bible Stories. I'm your host today, Mr. Brown, and I'm going to be reading two things for you. The first is from the Jesus Storybook Bible, and the story is called Daniel and the Scary Sleepover. Things were not looking good for God's people. They had been captured and taken far from home. And now they were slaves of the king of Babylon. But God had not left his people. He was with them, and he was looking after them. Daniel loved God and obeyed him. Now God made Daniel able to understand lots of difficult things. So it wasn't long before the king of Babylon noticed him. King Darius liked how clever Daniel was. So I made Daniel his most important helper of all, and put him in charge of lots of other helpers. But the other helpers didn't like this. They wanted the king to like them best, and they wanted to get rid of Daniel. So they spied on Daniel. They tried to find things wrong with Daniel, things they could tell the king, things they could... But there weren't any. None. They couldn't find anything at all. Except there was just this one thing. Every day, 3 times a day, without fail, no matter what, Daniel went to his room, closed the door, and prayed. They smiled to themselves. Let's get the king to make a law. No one is allowed to pray to anyone except to the king. Daniel won't obey this law, and he will be punished. They were pleased with themselves for being so clever and hurried off to tell the king. The king liked their idea. He didn't know they were tricking him. So he made it into a law. Everyone must pray only to me. If you don't, the lions will have you for your dinner. Daniel heard this. He knew it was wrong to pray to anyone except God. He had to do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die. So Daniel went to his room, closed the door, and prayed. And that's just what the bad man knew Daniel would do. They skipped straight off to tell the king, "Oh, your most glittering highness, your law says, does it not, that everyone must pray to you alone, sire?" "Yes," said the king. "Oh, magisterial brightness, then correct us if we're wrong, but it would seem that Daniel is praying to God and not to you." The king was sad. He had been tricked. He didn't want to hurt Daniel, but he couldn't change his law. And so he let the soldiers throw Daniel to the lions. "May your God, who you love so much, rescue you," the king said. The king went back to his palace, but he didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. He tossed and turned until finally, at the first glimmer of dawn, he leaped out of bed and ran straight to the den. "Daniel," he cried, "has your God rescued you?" "Yes," Daniel shouted. "God sent an angel to close the lions' mouths." And there, resting his head on Daniel's lap, was the biggest lion, purring like a little kitten. The king brought Daniel out of the den. "Look," he said, "Daniel doesn't even have a scratch." The king made a new law. Daniel's God is the true God, the God who rescues. Pray to him instead. God would keep on rescuing his people, and the time was coming when God would send another brave hero, like Daniel, who would love God and do what God said, whatever it cost him, even if it meant he would die. And together, they would pull off the greatest rescue the world has ever known. So that was our Bible story. And now for a bedtime story called Bed Hogs by Kelly DePucchio. In Sioux, South Dakota, in a sloppy, stuffy sty, there's an itchy old straw bed where the bedhogs pile high. Of course, the mama and the papa take up lots of space in bed, but so do sisters Rose and Flo, and Big Blue Ribbon Ed. Each night the hogs pack into bed, they squeeze and groan and grunt, but underneath the ton of them squeals loudmouth little Runt. I'm squished, I'm squashed, I'm buried in this heap. You're hogging up my space in bed. I'll never get to sleep. Rose, the reigning beauty queen, is tender, pink, and sweet. But more than just a pretty face, Rose has some stinky feet. P.U. Runt gave sweet Rose a little shove, and she tumbled out of bed. That left 5 hogs in the pile. Runt snuggled in and said, much better. Big sister Flo's a tidy hog, groomed neat from head to tail. But late at night, she drools enough to fill a milking pail. Ew! Runt gave Big Flo a little push, and she slipped right out of the bed. That left 4 hogs in the pile. Runt snuggled in and said, much better. Brother Ed is quite a ham. His jokes give him the giggles. But when he has a funny dream, the hog bed shakes and jiggles. Stop! Runt tickled Ed behind the ear, and Ed laughed right out of bed. That left 3 hogs in the pile. Runt snuggled in and said, much better. Mama dances in her sleep. She spins and twirls and hops. But all that fancy footwork means a swift kick in the chops. Ouch! Well, Runt swung his mama round and round, and she 2-stepped off the bed. That left 2 hogs in the pile. Runt snuggled in and said, much better. Papa hardly moves at all. He's still as fleas in muck. But from his snout there comes a snore that rumbles like a truck. Shh! Runt sprinkled fresh black pepper into Papa's noisy snout. That sneezing really did the trick, 'cause Papa Hog fell out. Achoo! Now there was 1 hog in the bed. Just 1 sleepy head. No Mama, no Papa, no sisters, no Ed. Runt hunkered down beneath the straw, alone there in the stack. He closed his eyes and hollered loud, "Hey, you guys, come back! I'm cold, I'm scared, I'm lonely in this heap. Without y'all hogging up the bed, I'll never get to sleep." So all the hogs came running and hopped back into bed. Mama, Papa, Rose, and Flo, and Big Blue Ribbon Ed. In Suey, South Dakota, on an itchy old straw bed, the bed hogs piled high again. Runt snuggled in and said, much better. Have a good night, everybody.